A tremor shook Buckingham Palace not from the outside, but from within. In an unprecedented move, Princess Anne submitted a classified internal report detailing chilling lapses in royal security. The implications? Devastating. As whispers turn into roars, the entire institution braces for impact. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began without warning. An urgent call summoned senior palace aides, advisors and senior royal liaisons to an emergency briefing just after dawn. The tone was stark. No official schedule, no explanations. Phones were confiscated. Rumors began spiraling within minutes. Something had shifted. By midday, a bombshell was whispered through the marbled halls of Buckingham. Princess Anne herself had delivered a sealed document that shook the monarchy's internal operations to their core. A classified report. One that didn't just expose a flaw, it exposed a catastrophe waiting to happen. Princess Anne, known for her unshakable loyalty and no-nonsense demeanor, was the last royal anyone expected to pull such a move. But according to those closest to her, she had grown increasingly concerned over recent months, concerned that the royal family's supposed fortress of tradition and power was far more vulnerable than anyone dared admit. What began as quiet observations became subtle warnings, and when those were ignored, she did what no other royal had dared. She escalated. The timing raised more questions than answers. Just days earlier, King Charles had retreated from public view citing fatigue, though insiders now believe he had sensed something brewing. With Camilla away on a private tour and William and Catherine hosting foreign dignitaries, Princess Anne struck. It wasn't just calculated, it was deliberate. She wanted minimal distractions. She wanted full focus. And most of all, she wanted accountability. Inside the report, which only a handful of individuals were initially cleared to view, was a compilation of overlooked red flags, suspicious silences, and deeply disturbing patterns. By the time word reached the wider circle of palace insiders, it was too late to suppress the momentum. The term emergency no longer felt theatrical, it was accurate. The walls of protocol had been pierced from the inside. While aides scrambled to understand the scale of what had been uncovered, a single quote began circulating allegedly from one of the senior figures who had seen the first pages. "This isn't just about security. It's about survival." The palace wasn't just caught off guard, it was exposed. The vulnerability wasn't physical alone, it was structural, systemic, and worst of all, deliberately ignored. The report was locked away behind titanium doors, under biometric security, and yet the tension in the air suggested it wouldn't remain hidden for long. Princess Anne hadn't just submitted a document, she had ignited a reckoning, one that could no longer be whispered about in passing or buried beneath royal protocol. One that now demanded answers from those who had turned a blind eye. As panic brews inside the palace walls, the report's classified pages begin to unravel a deeper, darker reality than anyone expected. What exactly triggered Princess Anne's explosive report? A security breach so severe, it shook even seasoned guards. Surveillance footage erased, an anonymous intruder, and missing royal artifacts. This was no ordinary lapse. It began with a single shadow that shouldn't have been there. Near Prince George's quarters, during what should have been a quiet afternoon, a figure was spotted moving past restricted access points. There was no clearance logged, no official name recorded, just the image of a coat, a blurred face, and a pair of gloves captured briefly by one security monitor before all feeds inexplicably went dark. 11 minutes. That's how long the palace was blind. And in those 11 minutes, something unthinkable happened. By the time cameras came back online, the figure had vanished. No exits opened, no guards alerted. It was as if they had slipped through a crack in the very foundations of royal protection. Initial panic was subdued until the inventory review. 3 historical artifacts once belonging to Queen Victoria were gone. A brooch, a handwritten journal, and an inscribed gold seal missing from a locked vault that should have required 4 separate clearances to access. None of them had been used. No alarms triggered, no break-in recorded. It didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt like a hand had reached from the inside. The palace responded with eerie silence. Aides who raised questions were met with hushed tones, then reassigned quietly to distant departments or offered early retirement packages. Official statements never came. Instead, whispers filled the void, speculations that the breach had inside help, that someone with deep knowledge of the palace's layouts, codes, and movements orchestrated the lapse. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was terrifying. Because if someone could do this once, they could do worse. Princess Anne, however, wasn't satisfied with silence. She had seen it before, patterns that emerged before crises. And in her view, this wasn't a one-off incident. It was part of something larger. The missing items, the conveniently erased footage, the strategic removals of key staff, they weren't disconnected, they were calculated. She began connecting threads that others ignored, compiling timelines, behavior shifts, even old logs from months past. Her instincts told her this wasn't just negligence, it was complicity. What chilled her most wasn't the items taken, it was how the breach targeted proximity to the future. Prince George's quarters were never far from the breach zone. That detail, buried in logs, sent alarm bells through Anne's mind. She realized the message wasn't just about the past, it was about the vulnerability of what's next. A threat not aimed at history, but at destiny. She saw clearly that the monarchy wasn't protected by its walls, it was exposed by the hands within them. But what Anne discovered in the weeks that followed would lead her down a trail of buried warnings and deliberate cover-ups. What if the palace wasn't watching, but being watched? Anne's report revealed tampered equipment, outdated protocol, and ghost networks unknown to even senior guards. Someone was hiding in plain sight. What began as a singular breach quickly expanded into something far more sinister. As Anne delved deeper into the palace's internal systems, she uncovered a twisted truth. The very tools meant to protect the royal family had been quietly turned against them. Surveillance logs meant to detail every movement within the royal corridors were found altered, some entries showing people in places they had never been, others completely omitting entire time blocks from existence. It wasn't an error, it was manipulation. Someone had deliberately doctored the evidence, falsifying timestamps, blurring the digital trail, and masking their presence. Worse yet, Princess Anne uncovered the existence of architectural blind spots, dead zones that had been strategically created over time in wings, rarely accessed by outsiders but regularly used by family members. These weren't natural gaps in coverage. They had been designed, approved, implemented, hidden within maintenance records and blueprint annotations, signed off by people who have since disappeared into comfortable retirement or were quietly removed in years past. It became undeniable someone had been laying the groundwork for surveillance breaches for a long time. As Anne's investigation turned to the palace's internal networks, another disturbing truth emerged. In quarters designated for household staff, unregistered recording devices were discovered, small, silent, and shielded from central detection. These weren't palace-issued, they weren't tracked. And no one could explain who installed them. The fear wasn't just that someone had broken in, it was that someone had never left. The pressure intensified. The palace IT team, once viewed as loyal and unshakable, was quietly interrogated behind closed doors. No official statement was made, but withy. N days, 2 of its longest-serving members abruptly resigned, citing personal reasons in brief exit memos that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Princess Anne wasn't satisfied. She demanded answers, but none came, only a silence that spoke volumes. And then came the moment that shifted everything. Encrypted data logs revealed unauthorized access points, not from within the UK, not even from Europe, but from offshore servers in jurisdictions beyond British oversight. Private footage, movement schedules, guard rotations, all accessed remotely. Whoever was watching had access, knowledge, and intent. And they were getting bolder. Princess Anne's words, etched into the margins of her report, left an echo that refuses to fade. We were never in control. It wasn't a declaration, it was a warning. A recognition that for years the palace had lived under the illusion of control, when in reality it had been quietly compromised from the inside out. A silent predator had been allowed to move freely within royal walls, using the family's own security to map their vulnerabilities. And now it was too late to pretend it hadn't happened. But the most damning part of the report wasn't about the past. It was a prediction of what might come next, codenamed Operation Sandglass. Anne's report outlined a potential threat model targeted not at the buildings, but at the royals themselves. The details are terrifying, the implications irreversible. The document was buried deep within the annex of Anne's classified submission, written in stark clinical language, but laced with undeniable urgency. It was a scenario on paper, yet it mirrored the breach that had already occurred. An unidentified operative exploiting technical blind spots infiltrates a royal wing. Surveillance fails. A high-value family member is within proximity. No alarms, no resistance, no trace. This wasn't theory. It was a mirrored reflection of reality, and it demanded to be taken seriously. But what shook investigators wasn't just the match to past events. It was what came next. Because this time, the intruder doesn't disappear. They remain. They observe. They strike. Anne commissioned risk assessments months prior, long before the breach, quietly, discreetly. What came back was damning. Evacuation drills were outdated. Response teams weren't synchronized. In several simulations, senior royals would have been exposed for up to 15 minutes without proper cover. Worse still, the youngest royals, George, Charlotte, and especially Louis, followed predictable daily paths through the palace. One of those routes, the one Prince Louis uses each morning, was flagged as critically exposed. No variation, no reinforcement. A routine broadcasted to any observer willing to watch long enough. Anne didn't need more proof. The patterns were too aligned. The risk no longer abstract. Her report included intelligence whispers, quiet, unconfirmed murmurs from foreign contacts, suggesting that certain royal routines had been observed by interests far outside the UK. Names weren't mentioned, but the message was clear. The monarchy, while shielded in appearance, was an open book to those who knew where to look. This wasn't just about curiosity. It was strategic, coordinated, focused not on symbols, but on people. The crown wasn't the target. The heirs were. The most chilling part, however, came when Anne referenced the long-abandoned Red Lockdown protocol. Initiated during the height of Cold War tensions, the program had been shelved after years of peace. But it was designed for this very threat, one where a royal was hunted, not for ransom, but for destabilization. Its reintroduction into Anne's report wasn't symbolic, it was necessary. Her message was clear: we've crossed back into danger, and we are unprepared to survive it. One aide, speaking off the record, confirmed what many had feared. It wasn't hypothetical, he whispered. It was rehearsed. Whether that rehearsal was internal or orchestrated from outside remained unknown. But the weight of that statement shattered any comfort left in the palace. They weren't working with theory anymore. They were facing a script someone else had already begun to execute. And Anne, in her stark, unflinching tone, had forced the palace to confront it. As pressure mounts, Princess Anne's decision to go public privately rattles even her closest allies. Behind the palace doors, tensions rise not from the outside world, but from within the royal bloodline. Princess Anne's exposé sparks disbelief, silence, and even fury among the royals. When the report began to circulate among the innermost royal circle, the reaction wasn't unified. It fractured. King Charles III, known for his desire to control the narrative rather than confront internal dissent, was said to be blindsided. Sources close to the crown revealed he had been kept out of key updates during the investigation's earliest stages. Whether by choice or design remains uncertain, but what is clear is that Anne's report struck him where he least expected, within his own house, under his reign. For a monarch who had survived decades of tabloid storms, this was different. This was betrayal laced with truth, and no amount of ceremonial grandeur could shield him from its sting. Whispers quickly turned into accusations. Queen Camilla's aides, many of whom had previously dismissed murmurs about security flaws as logistical hiccups, were now accused of burying concerns that had been raised long before Anne's findings. Some had even signed off on documents that now appeared complicit in deflecting deeper scrutiny. Internally, there was talk of deliberate ignorance, of whispers bay. Ings silenced so as not to disrupt carefully choreographed appearances. If Anne's report was a fire, These aides had poured gasoline on it through silence. Prince William didn't wait. As future king, he demanded to see the unredacted version of the report. His tone, according to insiders, was sharp, far colder than usual. He hadn't known the full scale, and he hadn't known that his own son's routine, Prince George's daily schedule, had been used as part of a breach simulation. That fact, buried within the pages, reportedly left him speechless. Anne, however, received no anger from him, only urgency. The heir to the throne was now acutely aware that the dangers were not theoretical, and the system he was born to inherit was riddled with rot. But it was Catherine, Princess of Wales, who responded in the most telling way. In private, she thanked Anne. Not formally, not publicly, but in a quiet conversation behind closed doors. It was a moment of shared clarity. For both women, bound by duty and yet often isolated by protocol, there was something deeper at stake than just security. It was the safety of their children, the weight of generational inheritance, and the vulnerability of playing perfect in a palace filled with cracks. Elsewhere, the rift widened. Princesses Eugenie and Beatrice, already navigating a complex maze of loyalty between the institution and their own values, found themselves caught in the storm. Some claim they supported Anne's stance, others say they hesitated, fearing the implications of being seen as siding against the crown. At Clarence House, one voice was overheard in the corridor: "This could tear us apart," and perhaps it already had. For the first time in years, it wasn't the press or the public testing the royal family's unity, it was the truth. As relationships splinter, the focus shifts to the true question: who enabled these failures and who stole? OD to gain. Buried deep in Anne's report were shocking allegations, warnings raised years ago, swept under the carpet by an inner circle. The names? Omitted, but clues point directly at those once entrusted with the crown's most sensitive decisions. The further one went into the classified annex of Princess Anne's report, the more disturbing the revelations became. It wasn't just about what had happened recently, it was about what had been allowed to happen for years. A hidden pattern emerged, stretching back to the final months of Queen Elizabeth II's reign. A series of internal warnings were issued, subtle, coded, and red-flagged by mid-level security advisors. These were not hypothetical concerns. They were direct, evidence-based alerts regarding potential vulnerabilities and oddities in both personnel and protocol. But time after time, those warnings were either marked as inconvenient to discuss or labeled as low-priority noise. Not a single one was acted upon. The problem, Anne realized, was not that the system was broken, it was that a parallel one existed. She called it, in coded references, the Shadow Council. Not an official body, not something listed in any chart, but a group that had, for decades, quietly influenced matters of security, logistics, and public perception. They didn't answer to the monarch, they answered to continuity. Their role? Preserve the image at all costs, even if it meant compromising the truth. Their fingerprints were everywhere, but their names were absent, deliberately so. When questioned in the past, their decisions were defended as being in the interest of tradition. But now, that shield of tradition had been exposed as a veil for silence. Anne's report didn't name the council, but she left no doubt. Her wording was razor sharp. "We gave the wolf a key to the gate." It was more than poetic, it was an indictment. Someone, perhaps typal individuals, had either knowingly or recklessly handed power to those who had not earned trust, but exploited it. One name stood out in whispers: a high-ranking official known to be closely tied to both security coordination and media strategy. Strangely, this official had been reassigned to a diplomatic role abroad just days before the breach occurred. No public announcement, no formal explanation, just gone. The suggestion of a cover-up began to crystallize, and it wasn't just about this one breach. Anne's report tied threads back to the unresolved fallout from the Prince Andrew security scandal. There too were discrepancies in clearance logs, unexplained access overrides, and the abrupt removal of personnel who knew too much. But back then, the public eye was focused elsewhere. The outrage had been deflected toward personal disgrace. The operational failures were buried. Now those buried failures were clawing back to the surface. This wasn't just incompetence, it was coordination, a quiet, calculated suppression of accountability, done in the name of preserving the institution. But now, the very institution those figures claimed to protect was shaking from the consequences of their deceit. Anne hadn't simply blown a whistle, she had detonated a truth bomb, and its aftershocks were still traveling down the corridors of power, toward a single person whose next decision could either restore stability or collapse it entirely. As the palace walls tremble under suspicion, Princess Anne's report reaches the one figure who could tip the balance permanently. Catherine, Princess of Wales, poised, calculated and widely beloved, receives a sealed envelope marked Anne, urgent. What she reads inside sets off a silent alarm and changes her next move forever. The moment the envelope touched her hands, something shifted. No crest, no flourish, just a plain seal and Anne's U. Unmistakable handwriting. Catherine opened it alone. There were no courtiers, no aides, no security personnel present. What she found inside wasn't dramatic, it was devastating. Anne's words were restrained, precise, but they carried a weight that could crush centuries of ceremonial armor. The full scope of the breach, the cover-ups and most chilling of all evidence, suggesting that her children's schedules, down to their morning walks and evening windows, had been traced, documented, and possibly monitored. There were no direct threats. But the implication was clear: the family's safety had been compromised, and no one had been told. Hours later, she met Princess Anne behind closed doors at Windsor. That meeting has never been officially acknowledged, but sources insist it was both tense and tender. Two women bound by duty, one confronting a storm, the other dragging it into daylight. Catherine's first words after reading the report were not filled with outrage. They were resolute. "We can't stay quiet anymore." From that moment, her role shifted not as a royal symbol, but as a mother, a wife, a guardian of legacy. She understood the gravity, but more importantly, she understood what silence would cost. Within days, without explanation, Catherine cancelled an upcoming public appearance scheduled at a children's hospital. Officially, the reason given was logistical conflict, but behind the scenes it was far more calculated. She needed time. Time to reassess her own internal team. Time to bring in voices she could trust. Unofficial meetings began with private security advisors, figures not tied to royal payroll, not embedded in palace tradition. Independent, unfiltered. Their assessments were damning. She wasn't paranoid. She was late. Insiders began noticing subtle but undeniable changes. Catherine, always gracious and measured, became distant with certain long-serving aides, not hostile, just cold. Files stopped crossing certain desks. Access was reduced. Requests for briefings were redirected or ignored entirely. One aide remarked off the record, "It was like someone flipped a switch. We weren't working with her anymore. We were working around her." And perhaps that was precisely the point. Catherine wasn't broadcasting mistrust. She was enacting it, quietly, without confrontation, but with unmistakable intent. She didn't share the full contents of the report with William, not yet. Timing mattered. Strategy mattered. This wasn't about shock. It was about leverage. And Catherine understood more than anyone that the closer one stood to the crown, the sharper the blade of betrayal. She had no time for missteps. Every decision she made now rippled beyond the confines of the palace. It touched the monarchy itself. But just when the palace believes the chaos is contained, an unexpected leak catapults the internal crisis onto the world stage. 1 minute ago, an encrypted file leaked to an international outlet. Anne's report, previously sealed in titanium, is now public. As headlines explode and cameras descend, the monarchy faces its most vulnerable moment in modern history. The breach was silent. No press statement, no controlled release. Just a sudden torrent of global headlines erupting across screens from London to Washington, from Sydney to Singapore. An encrypted document, heavily redacted but undeniably authentic, had found its way into the hands of one of Europe's most aggressive investigative outlets. Within moments, journalists pieced together fragments, security blind spots, foreign access to surveillance networks, the phrase Operation Sandglass, and the chilling line, "We were never in control." It was enough. The illusion of stability shattered in seconds. Within hours, the palace gates were under siege not by protesters, but by lenses, microphones, and vans loaded with satellite feeds. Reporters demanded answers. Commentators speculated wildly. Former staffers were pulled out of retirement to appear on air. Headlines didn't ask questions, they screamed declarations. Royal security in crisis, a princess's silent revolt. Who knew and when? The pressure was instant, unrelenting, and public. The official response from Buckingham Palace arrived late, a brief, calculated statement: "We are investigating the source and content of the alleged document. The safety of the royal family remains our utmost priority." But the words landed flat, too rehearsed, too late. The world had already seen enough to know something had gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. The once sacred veil of royal confidentiality had been ripped apart by one ruthless, calculated leak. And then came the twist that no one saw coming. An anonymous source, reportedly close to the palace, contacted multiple media outlets with a simple but stunning claim: the leak did not come from outside. It came from within. A member of the royal circle, someone with access and motive, had deliberately made the document public. They didn't want the truth buried under tradition. They wanted it detonated in the court of global opinion. But who? Why now? Was it Catherine seeking leverage? William silently seizing control? Or someone else entirely, hiding behind loyalty while plotting revenge? Princess Anne, the very architect of the report, was unreachable. She offered no interviews. She released no statement. She cancelled no appearances. Her silence roared louder than any microphone. It wasn't denial. It wasn't retreat. It was deliberate. As if she understood that this moment was no longer about explanation. It was abo. What would happen next? Speculation spiraled. Names were floated, motives dissected. Former staff hinted at rivalries, feuds, and long-standing mistrusts finally erupting beneath the crown. Some even suggested the leak was part of a larger plan to force change, to purge shadows, to save the monarchy by first exposing its rot. But behind every theory lurked one undeniable truth. The royal family had lost control of its own secrets, and the public wasn't watching for scandal anymore. It was watching for collapse. But this isn't the end, it's only the beginning, because the report's final page reveals a future scenario more terrifying than any breach. The final page of Anne's report reveals a chilling projection, a scenario labeled the Collapse Protocol. It's not just about security. It's about the monarchy's survival, and it may already be in motion. Tucked away at the very end of the classified document, beyond the breach breakdowns and operational failures, sat a section few ever expected to see. The Collapse Protocol wasn't a plan, it was a prophecy. A worst-case model Anne had constructed using years of intel, risk analyses, and internal behaviors that had long gone uncorrected. It didn't predict a future breach. It assumed one. And in that scenario, the consequences weren't just logistical, they were existential. If the royal family were to experience another incident, another infiltration, another exposure, public confidence would not simply waver. It would collapse, and with it, the very structure that had held the monarchy together through wars, divorces, and scandals. Anne didn't rely on abstract warnings. She pointed directly to events tied to royal succession transitions, ceremonies, periods of mourning when public emotion is high, but security focus is split. These moments, she warned, were ripe for exploitation. If trust is fractured during one of these pivotal transitions, it doesn't heal. It breaks, permanently. And then, there was the most haunting element, a red-circled date, isolated in a margin, with no accompanying explanation, no label, no context, just a single circle. A countdown, perhaps, a tip-off, a silent warning to those who understood what was truly at stake. The language turned starker as the pages neared the end. Anne referenced the idea of an irreversible breach not in walls or passwords, but in the collective psyche of a nation. The monarchy didn't just rely on protocol. It relied on belief. And once the public stopped believing they were safe, noble, or even necessary, no document, no press conference, no royal wave could bring that belief back. This wasn't about preserving power, it was about preventing extinction. But what left the most disturbing imprint was a buried sentence, a single sentence that shifted the entire tone of the report. The saboteur is not external. With that, Anne cast a long, dark shadow across the institution. Someone within the royal machine, not just carelessly negligent, but actively complicit, was part of the destabilization. A person with access, with influence, still unnamed, still protected, and potentially still operating. Her final words echoed like a warning flare, not to the press, not to the world, but to those sitting within the palace walls. If they don't listen now, they never will. This wasn't Anne pleading. It was Anne declaring that she had done everything she could, and if they failed to act, history would not view them kindly. She didn't write with fear. She wrote with certainty. And that certainty, now public and irreversible, has placed the monarchy on a knife's edge. As the monarchy teeters between revelation and ruin, only one question remains: who else knew and who is still hiding? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.